How do you deal with that as a family?
Well, we don't, in many respects, need to deal with it.
A bombshell leak from inside Buckingham Palace has sent shockwaves through royal watching circles. Princess Anne has unexpectedly bestowed upon Princess Charlotte a title bearing the name of a legendary royal figure, accompanied by the very tiara once tied to Britain's most beloved icon. The decision instantly ignited a fierce confrontation. Queen Camilla reportedly lost her composure, openly demanding the ceremony be halted right in front of stunned guests. But that was just the opening act. Sources close to the palace reveal that Anne was not acting on a whim. For months, she has been quietly investigating the mysterious disappearance of a trove of letters, diaries, photographs, and artifacts from the royal archives. Just as her investigation closed in on the truth, a cover-up campaign was reportedly triggered. Former witnesses faced sudden pressure, and attempts were made to pin the blame on someone who has already passed away. However, the sudden emergence of a secret flash drive has now threatened to bring the entire plot crashing down. What is on that USB drive that allegedly plunged Camilla into such a panic, driving her to silence witnesses at all costs? And what evidence did Anne bring to her private showdown with King Charles that could alter the Queen's fate forever? The crystal chandeliers in the Buckingham Palace Grand Banquet Hall poured down a glorious yet cold golden light, illuminating the faces of Britain's highest elite. Princess Anne, the only daughter of the late Queen Elizabeth II, a woman renowned for her bluntness, devotion, and a lifetime of quiet service to the throne for over half a century, stood apart in a corner of the ballroom. Her formal royal attire and inherently austere demeanor made her resemble a steadfast stone statue amidst the turbulent currents of changing times. Anne's sharp eyes swept subtly across the crowd, coming to rest on young Charlotte, her brother's granddaughter, a little princess bearing the heavy weight of an entire dynasty's expectations on her shoulders. As she stepped onto the dais, the surrounding atmosphere suddenly grew heavy. A hush fell over the room as Anne slowly opened a small, deep blue velvet box, revealing a delicate miniature diamond tiara, an exquisite heirloom once closely tied to the image of the late Princess Diana during her early years as a royal bride. The ballroom seemed to freeze as Princess Anne spoke, announcing the bestowal of the honorary title named after Princess Diana, along with this very tiara, upon Charlotte. This historic decision was not merely an award, but a fierce declaration that Charlotte would be the one to inherit the spirit of compassion, devotion, and the spiritual legacy of her late grandmother. Anne's hands were resolute as she lifted the tiara, but her eyes held a profound depth of emotion, as if she were fulfilling a long overdue promise to the deceased. Astonishment instantly spread through the room like an undercurrent. Crystal glasses in the hands of the guests froze, and hushed whispers died down, replaced by sharp, scrutinized looks of disbelief. The event erupted like a bolt of lightning from a clear sky, shattering the facade of peace that masked the evening gala. On the opposite side, Queen Camilla stood frozen to the spot. Her face, which usually maintained a flawless social smile, suddenly stiffened and then quickly turned pale with shock. For Camilla, who had spent decades confronting the ghost of Diana's past to reach her current position, the name Diana had always been a forbidden zone, a wound that had never truly healed within the royal power structure. For Anne to publicly honor Diana's legacy in the very heart of Buckingham Palace on a solemn anniversary was nothing short of a splash of cold water to the face of her legitimate status. The resentment smoldering in Camilla's heart rapidly twisted into an uncontrollable rage. Disregarding the strict royal protocols that demanded ultimate public restraint, she immediately stepped forward. Her arm trembled with agitation as she raised her voice in open opposition, demanding that Princess Anne halt the ceremony at once. Camilla's tone overflowed with bitterness as she insisted that this decision was entirely inappropriate, had not passed through the royal council, and was an insult to the existing order. This sudden loss of composure inadvertently pushed Camilla into the eye of the storm, transforming her into the very embodiment of selfishness and jealousy before the eyes of countless powerful witnesses. Camilla's instinct for self-defense had driven her to make a fatal mistake, exposing her vulnerability to an ever-composed Anne. In the face of her sister-in-law's fierce and furious reaction, Princess Anne did not flinch. She stood tall, her shoulders rigid, staring straight at the woman panting with rage before her with a chilling coldness. Without a word of argument, without a gesture of self-defense, Anne merely let a subtle, enigmatic smile play upon her lips. A smile laden with deep understanding and a carefully calculated plan. Amidst the utter bewilderment and anxiety of the entire royal family and their guests, Princess Anne slowly stepped down from the dais. She walked past Camilla with a look of proud dismissal. But before vanishing from the crowd's sight, she left behind a quiet declaration that carried the weight of a mountain. Anne asserted that today's ceremony was no impulsive act, but merely the beginning of a chain of truths about to be unveiled, and that she possessed an unshakable, justifiable reason for her decision. Anne's resolute figure disappeared behind the grand doors, leaving behind a ballroom chaotic with speculation and a trembling Camilla gripped by a vague dread of the massive storm about to break over the monarchy. The darkness of the night rapidly swallowed the clamor of the grand banquet, returning Buckingham Palace to its inherent solemnity and solitude. Princess Anne stood by the window, her gaze fixed intently on the palace courtyard, shrouded in fog. The composure on her face was no longer a diplomatic mask, but the coldness of a judge. Her mind replayed every frame of the secret investigation she had quietly conducted for months, a solitary journey that had begun with vague suspicions when she happened to review family archives. Anne's decision to delve into the royal archives had initially sprung merely from an intention to locate a few old letters of her late mother, Queen Elizabeth II, to prepare material for a charitable foundation. However, the suffocating atmosphere, heavy with the scent of old paper and dried ink in the deep underground vault, had opened up a chilling void. As Anne's thin fingers slid across metal drawers labeled by period, she noticed an anomaly that froze her spine. The thick files concerning the period from 1981 to 1997, Diana's turbulent years as a royal bride, were all absurdly thin. The inherent meticulousness of a person who had managed hundreds of charities helped Anne spot traces of mechanical purging. A vast number of handwritten letters in the distinctive, elegant cursive of the Princess of Wales diaries, recording the inner thoughts of a lonely woman behind the palace walls, and even unpublished rolls of documentary film had vanished without a trace. Not a single transfer record or official destruction order remained in the digital management system. Someone had erased them with terrifying professionalism, as if wishing to evaporate a person and identity from the official history of the House of Windsor. Anne's suspicion turned into a smoldering outrage when she sought access to a trusted former butler, a man who had served at Kensington Palace for over a decade and witnessed Diana's most private moments. The meeting took place in a small tea house on the outskirts of London, where the silver-haired man trembled as he held his teacup, his eyes darting around in fear. The former butler, his voice shaking and his knuckles clenched, White confirmed a horrifying truth. He revealed that immediately after the tragic accident in Paris, a covert order had been handed down. Multiple trucks carrying boxes of Diana's documents and personal mementos were secretly confiscated and moved from the residence in the dead of night. More chillingly, every archivist, butler, or private secretary aware of the existence of those boxes eventually received transfer orders to remote countryside areas or faced stark warnings from high-ranking figures demanding absolute silence if they wished to preserve their pensions and honor. Every piece of the puzzle had now fallen into place, forming a flawless picture of a deliberate campaign. A systematic and ruthless plan to wipe out Diana's legacy and blur her influence from the minds of posterity, making way for a new legitimacy. Meanwhile, in another corner of the palace, the atmosphere in Queen Camilla's bedroom was as suffocating as a prison cell. Her face deeply etched with lines of anxiety and fear, the decisive slam of Anne's door, and her ominous declaration at the evening gala echoed continuously in Camilla's mind, like a death knell. She knew full well that Anne was not one to make empty threats. The steadfastness and sharp mind of her sister-in-law were things Camilla had warily respected for all these years. The sense of insecurity gnawed like a parasite at Camilla's remaining confidence. She realized that Anne's quiet investigation was not merely a rummaging through the past, but was advancing dangerously close, suffocatingly close to the greatest secret she had spent so much effort to bury. Memories of signing off on covert decrees and midnight phone calls with insiders at the archives years ago rushed back, leaving a cold sweat on Camilla's palms. She understood that if those missing files, along with the identity of the person behind the destruction order, were brought to light, the queen consort crown on her head would instantly turn into a noose, tightening around her reputation and her future. Camilla stopped before the large mirror, staring intently at her own reflection, a powerful woman whose eyes were filled with the panic of someone about to be exposed. The storm was imminent, and she knew she could no longer sit still and wait for the end. The paralyzing fear of exposure transformed into a dark energy, urging Camilla to act immediately. In the dim shadows of her room, she sat at her desk, the light from the bedside lamp casting a harsh glow over a face filled with cold calculations. She ordered a complete wipe of any remaining digital footprints on the royal servers, clearing temporary cache files and access logs from years ago that were linked to Diana's archives. Not stopping there, Camilla began plotting to shift the entire blame onto a former royal secretary who had passed away a few years prior, someone no longer capable of vindicating himself or speaking out in denial. She personally flipped through old files, deliberately planting forged signatures and subtly aged memoranda to frame the deceased as the sole mastermind behind the confiscation of the mementos. Each of Camilla's actions was frantic and rushed, her breath coming in short gasps within a space thick with the scent of perfume and guilt. She repeatedly picked up her secure phone, utilizing her authority as queen to pressure aging witnesses, former cleaners, and retired guards, forcing them to remain silent or leave London that very night. Yet Camilla's web of power could not derail Princess Anne's unwavering resolve. Accepting the daunting wall of silence and the apprehensive shakes of the head from former witnesses, Anne still doggedly tracked the faintest clues. She knew they feared the might of the woman who currently held the title of Queen Consort. They feared a retaliation that would shatter the fragile peace of their twilight years. Every time she was turned away, every time the door of a suburban home slammed shut in her face, Anne's gaze grew sharper and colder. She did not lose heart. The perseverance of a woman forged through decades of royal storms helped her find a glimmer of light in the least expected place. On a pouring rainy afternoon at a desolate suburban cemetery, Anne stood waiting beneath a large black umbrella. A former royal archivist who had lived in reclusion for the past 10 years following his abrupt transfer, slowly approached from behind the rows of tombstones. The man's face was deeply etched with fear, yet his eyes shone with a long overdue sense of liberation. With hands trembling from both the chill of the rain and sheer agitation, he covertly drew a waterproof paper bundle, From inside his heavy coat, containing copies of countless original documents that Camilla had ordered destroyed, along with a small black USB flash drive. Clutching the USB in her hand, Anne felt the crushing weight of the truth. The former employee whispered an explanation through haunting nods, revealing that this flash drive contained a top-secret audio recording he had surreptitiously intercepted from the internal phone system years ago. It was a direct, undeniable command, spoken in Camilla's own voice, demanding at all costs the destruction and eradication of all Diana's letters, photographs, and keepsakes to avoid tarnishing her image ahead of her wedding day. Upon returning to her private study at the palace, Anne locked the door securely. She inserted the USB drive into her computer, put on her headphones, and pressed play. Camilla's familiar voice echoed through the static, sharp, cold, and authoritarian, commanding the evaporation of a deceased person's legacy. Each word felt like a dagger struck straight into the royal dignity that Anne had spent her life protecting. She shut her laptop and stood up with absolute determination. Unable to delay for even another second, Anne gathered the entire file, clenched the USB tightly in her palm, and marched straight toward Clarendon Apartments, where King Charles was currently staying, resolved to lay the entire truth bare before the sovereign. The atmosphere inside King Charles's private study was so suffocating that the air felt thick, casting an invisible pressure over everything. Princess Anne stood tall, her hands tightly interlaced in front of her, her majestic demeanor akin to a judge preparing to pass sentence. Opposite her, King Charles sat brooding in a premium leather armchair, his face deeply etched with lines of exhaustion and utter bewilderment. On the other side of the desk, Camilla attempted to maintain a calm facade, but her fingers were unconsciously gripping her crocodile skin clutch so tightly that her stark white knuckles betrayed her extreme tension. With unhesitating decisiveness, Anne took a step forward. Her thin yet powerful hands lay out before the king one by one, each file of copied documents gathered from the secret archives, signature authentications, and a list of witnesses accompanied by detailed testimonies. Each sheet of paper touching the wooden desk made a dry thud like gunshots, shattering Camilla's final shreds of hope. The climax came when Anne slowly placed the small black USB flash drive right in the center of the desk as the most definitive piece of evidence. She leaned forward to activate the audio file on the playback device. A static crackle echoed for a few seconds before Camilla's voice, sharp, dictatorial, and authoritarian, filled the silent room. The recording played out every word of her command to destroy everything belonging to Diana, from old love letters to historical records. Hearing this, King Charles's chest heaved erratically, his eyes widening as he stared at the USB drive as if unable to believe his own ears. The naked, ruthless truth was exposed through the very voice of the woman he had spent years protecting with both his honor and his throne. Confronted with the greatest nightmare of her life, Camilla's survival instinct flared fiercely. She immediately spoke up in total denial, her voice hurried and somewhat cracking with agitation. She shook her head repeatedly, her platinum hair swaying with every panicked gesture. Camilla argued that all this evidence was the product of a smear campaign, a sophisticated fabrication by those who held a deep vendetta against her, and that the recording had likely been spliced together using modern digital technology. She strained toward Charles, her eyes filled with urgency, mixed with hurt, desperately explaining that she had never issued such a callous order. Each of Camilla's justifications rang with bitterness, attempting to direct the king's suspicion toward hostile outside forces. However, the defensive wall Camilla tried so hard to erect crumbled completely due to an unexpected twist no one foresaw. From the shadows of the room, a former witness, the old guard, who had served at Kensington Palace years ago, whom Anne had strictly protected over the past few days, slowly stepped into the light. His footsteps were slow, yet steady, his gaunt frame, clad in a worn wool coat. Faced with Camilla's glaring, threatening stare, the guard did not flinch. He bowed slightly to the king, and then in a somber but resolute voice confirmed that the contents of the recording were entirely true. He asserted that his own ears had heard that phone call, and his own eyes had seen the crates of documents being carted away in the dead of night. The witness's confirmation acted as a killing blow to Camilla's obstinacy. King Charles sat frozen to the spot, his face turning from flushed with anger to pale with ultimate disappointment. All excuses now appeared utterly brazen in the face of such vivid evidence and a living witness. He quietly reached out his slightly trembling fingers, softly closing the wide-open file. The gesture was slow, but carried the supreme weight of destiny. King Charles slowly raised his head, his gaze completely devoid of warmth or protection, leaving only a profound, freezing disappointment as he looked straight into Camilla's terror-stricken eyes. King Charles's cold gaze poured like icy water into the room, but Princess Anne did not allow that silence to stretch on for too long. With the composure and precision of someone executing a sacred duty, she proceeded to open the next section of the file. Anne's hands moved decisively, laying out meticulously prepared timeline comparison charts. Upon them, each day and hour of the covert decrees, the unusual financial transactions from Camilla's private fund and the royal personnel transfer orders were placed side by side, forging a tight, undeniable chain of logic. Anne slowly used her finger to point at the milestones, proving that the disappearance of countless documents, diaries, and mementos belonging to Diana was no accidental mishap, no loss due to poor management, as previous palace explanations had claimed. It was a roadmap with a clear timeline carried out sporadically over many years to evade notice, yet accelerating abnormally just prior to major royal events. Anne's meticulousness in peeling back each layer of evidence made the atmosphere in the study grow increasingly suffocating. The truth was no longer mere rumor on the pages of tabloids, but had materialized into a sophisticatedly organized crime of destroying historical heritage. Before the tightening net of evidence, Camilla felt the ground beneath her feet give way. The pride of a woman who had weathered 100,000 storms to sit in the Queen Consort's chair now dissolved into a desperate resistance. Her face flushed crimson with humiliation and rage, the wrinkles at the corners of her eyes twitching incessantly. Unable to continue denying the existence of the documents, Camilla instantly shifted her tactics. She began pinning the entire blame onto her close subordinates, her loyal secretaries and archivists, whom she claimed had acted on their own initiative out of a desire to protect the peace of the monarchy and avoid unnecessary controversy for the king. Camilla spoke, her trembling hands raised, as if to explain, trying to paint a picture where she too was merely a victim of the overzealousness of those beneath her. She searched for a modicum of sympathy, a flicker of hesitation in her husband's eyes. However, all of Camilla's deflections, counterclaims, and finger-pointing became utterly futile when Anne presented the original copy of a handwritten order bearing Camilla's own fresh signature and personal seal, an item no subordinate had the right to possess or forge. Those ironclad pieces of evidence instantly blocked every path of retreat for her. Amidst this silent storm of contention, King Charles remained motionless. His silence carried the weight of a sovereign forced to stand before a cruel choice between personal affection and the honor of an entire dynasty. After a heavy sigh, Charles slowly opened his desk drawer, pulling out a different file bound in the blue color of the Independent Security Office. He placed it upon the desk, gently sliding it toward Anne and Camilla. With a bitter shake of his head, The king revealed that he had secretly requested an independent investigative agency to step in from the very night the incident erupted at the Buckingham Evening Gala. The results of that independent investigation aligned flawlessly, without a millimeter of variance, with what Anne's own probe had unmasked. Every account, every phone call, and every destruction order was objectively verified. This was the final straw shattering Camilla's last remaining illusions. The king slowly stood up his posture, seeming to age by several years after this ordeal. He no longer looked in Camilla's direction, his gaze fixed on the dark courtyard outside the window. Closing a long chapter of tolerance and protection, Charles declared in a low but distinct voice that he could no longer place his trust in the woman beside him. That sentence was the definitive verdict, completely terminating Camilla's influence within the Windsor court. King Charles's final decision was delivered with a cold decisiveness akin to a blade severing every privilege Camilla had ever possessed. The very next morning, an internal decree was issued within the royal family. The king officially stripped Camilla of all influence over the internal affairs of the House of Windsor, while minimizing her appearance in official public engagements to the absolute limits. The authority to manage, oversee, and restore the entirety of the historical archives was transferred completely to Princess Anne, the only woman who had maintained her integrity and composure throughout the storm. Faced with the collapse of the empire of power she had spent half her life constructing, Camilla chose to accept her retreat in silence. No longer were there furious protests or covert schemes as she confined herself to isolated rooms within Clarence House. Meanwhile, the media and the public began to scent an anomaly in the Queen's sudden absence. Skeptical questions, theories of a rift, and dark secrets of the past continuously surfaced on the front pages of major newspapers, generating a suffocating pressure that besieged the woman now tasting the bitterest isolation. Conversely, under the strict and meticulous direction of Princess Anne, an unprecedented large-scale campaign to restore the legacy commenced. Sealed oak crates and bundles of documents wrapped in waterproof bags, which had been buried in remote warehouses or confiscated from the hands of insiders, were escorted back to Buckingham Palace one after another by royal security convoys. Every handwritten letter in that elegant sweeping cursive, every worn diary bearing the marks of Diana's turbulent years, down to the precious rolls of documentary film, were carefully handled by archivists in white gloves, sorted and rearranged into their rightful place in history. Each artifact returned to its origin was like a brick helping to heal the wounds of the royal family, erasing a chapter of history distorted by jealousy. Anne stood in the sunlit archives, watching Diana's records being preserved with utmost solemnity. Her chest felt light, as if a 3-decade-old curse had just been lifted. She knew she had not done this for revenge or to divide the family, but to restore truth to history and protect the future of the generations to come. Weeks later, during an intimate internal service at the Memorial Chapel, young Princess Charlotte appeared among the members of the royal family. The little girl wore a graceful blue dress, her regal hair adorned with the exquisite miniature diamond tiara, Diana's keepsake, that Anne had bestowed upon her on that stormy night of the grand banquet. The light from the flickering candles caught the diamonds, creating a sparkling aura around Charlotte's bright, innocent face. The moment the little girl looked up at the portrait of her late grandmother with a warm smile, the entire room felt a sacred continuation. Diana was no longer a forbidden name. Her legacy had truly been restored, living on proudly and brilliantly through the future generation. Watching from a distance, Princess Anne offered a soft smile, a smile of profound contentment, knowing that the truth had triumphed and that the icon of compassion would forever be preserved beneath the roof of Windsor. After reading this story, in your opinion, was Princess Anne's quiet investigation and exposure of the truth driven by absolute loyalty to the monarchy? Or was it actually an outburst of decades of suppressed resentment on behalf of Princess Diana? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.